Hi there. My name is Dr. Kim Ernest. I am a licensed psychologist, licensed professional counselor, the president of Pennsylvania Counseling Services, the founder of Live Up Counseling, and today on the How to Be Happy Hour, we're going to be talking about friendships in adulthood and across the lifespan.
My name is Shane Yonchek. I'm a family-based therapist. I work for Pennsylvania Counseling Services in our Dauphin County office. I'm also a director of youth and family ministries at Zion Hummelstown Lutheran Church.
Hi, everybody. My name is Melanie O'Cansey. I'm an outpatient drug and alcohol and mental health therapist at a Reading Psych location through Pennsylvania Counseling.
Hi, I'm Nicole Weaver. I am school-based outpatient for Pennsylvania Counseling, and I work in the Lebanon City Schools, and I also mentor all of our school-based.
Well, thank you all for joining me here today. As we get started, just a reminder for our listeners that all of the season 3 of How to Be Happy Hour, we're going to be unpacking different important relationships that people have within their world, within their experiences, and just kind of looking at how each of these different relationships interplay with our own quest for happiness or maybe get in the way of that goal as well. As we start out, I have a few data points that I kind of prepared for our talk here today. And so I wanted to start out with those pieces. Overall, it seems like friendships, while they don't tend to be prioritized in the same way as romantic partnerships and familial relationships often are, what the data really shows is that truthfully, strong friendship relationships tend to lead to longer, healthier lives compared to those with weaker ties. They have a tendency for these individuals to have more hobbies, be more likely to have shared goals within their friend group, and have a greater sense of fulfillment, as well as a greater sense of personal identity, which I thought was really interesting. What we've also discovered in our research on friendships is that social well-being is one of the key predictors of happiness when it comes to adults. So it's one of the number one predictors, with research showing that we spend between 6 and 7 hours a day socializing, and that people who spend that 6 to 7 hours a day in some sort of social activity, whether it be at work, whether it be in the care of their children or whatever it is, that engage with those external to the family system between 6 and 7 hours a day, are 12 times more likely to experience happiness compared to those who have lower levels of connection. And then what we also know about friendships is that they tend to evolve and shift across the lifespan. So when kids are little, they have often multiple different friend groups depending on different contexts that they're engaged in. So schools, neighborhoods, teams, church or extracurricular activities. Then as they get into their 20s, it has a tendency to be more surrounding their educational settings, their employment settings, and shared interests. As time goes on, they tend to be more like in your 30s, and 40s, it tends to go more into employment, community involvement, and then whatever relationships you develop over your role as a parent, through that parenting aspect. And then as you get into the 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond, it has to do more with community events. Workplace is still there, but alumni networks as well tend to play a bigger role in this environment. Volunteering, travel groups, which I thought was an interesting, and it's funny because my parents do a bunch of trips with their church, and that's where their friend group has really emerged from. And then what I thought was most curious is our folks in our 60s, 70s, technology and virtual connections tend to still be really important for that population. So overall, I don't know, the data is really positive that we should have friendships and that these friendships serve us, they benefit us, we're healthier, happier, we live longer. And yet I feel like the friendship in adulthood gets a bad rap. So what are y'all's thoughts about this adult friendship and sort of how we can better tap into that resource when it comes to feeling connected and, I don't know, all the benefits it has to offer?
I could start.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I have 3 friends, and we've been very close for over 10 years at this point. But what was interesting is in the past year, I actually made a new friend, which was very difficult for me. I feel like in adulthood, it is very difficult to make new friends, because your time is taken with so many other things. You have kids, you have work, you have your volunteer work, your church, and I feel like to have like a close connection that's not only because of the environment might be difficult. So I actually hired a cat sitter for my wedding and my honeymoon. And when she came to like check out the house for the cats, I just realized we were a little similar. I was like, okay. And then like 8 months later, she saw a post for a yoga studio that was opening and was like, hey, I remember you say you like yoga, FYI, here it is. Another 2 months pass, and I was like feeling really lonely and like I needed, some more connection. So I texted her, I was like, hey, we should try to get together like once a week. And now we get together once a week or, once every 2 weeks, and we either do yoga or go out to eat or go for a walk. But it was interesting to create this new friendship that was like somebody I never would have met out. Like it was a random person I found on like Rover.
I think that's how you make friendships in adulthood. Because I've also, I think, only made one adult friendship, truthfully, that has become like a lifelong heart friend, right? We talked before we started recording that we might have seasonal friends or relationships that are friendly and you hang out for a season. But I mean, this gal's been around for about a year, or I'm sorry, she's been around for about 7 years. But we met because she accidentally showed up to an Easter egg hunt that I was hosting. And then just stayed. She was like, I thought it was public. And I was like, I love you. We'll be friends forever. So I think that's sort of how it started. And but it was the most obscure, and this is a topic that was actually requested. We had one of our therapists probably 2 years ago now said, I'd really like a topic about adult friendships and how do we maintain friendships in adulthood? How do we make friendships in adulthood? And I laughed out loud when I got the email requesting this topic because I was like, the only friend I've ever had I made because she was trespassing at my parents' house. Like, that's it. That's what happened. Awesome. And so it is curious, like, how do we do these things? And I'm in my 40s, like, where do you make friends in your 40s? Like, that's crazy.
Well, and I think too, I've had like probably one that has stuck, but we met through PA counseling. But we are lifers, like we will be friends forever. But I think I still have those sections. Like my son plays soccer, so like I have my soccer mom friends, and I have like my friends here and my friends there. But I think that's easy to make those seasonal friends. I'm a very like outgoing person. Like that comes natural to me. I'll just randomly sit next to someone. I would have probably like trespassed on your property and been like, hey friends. But keeping them as like, my son played t-ball. I don't talk to the t-ball moms anymore because he doesn't play t-ball anymore.
Yeah.
But again, our boys are best friends. So I think about that sometimes. I'm like, I love this mom. Will we continue if our boys are not friends anymore? And I'm like, I hope so, but it's interesting. Where do you make friends at this age?
When that's it, my kids have had friends come and go, but I still really like the parents. Yeah. And I just invited one to my son's birthday party, but she had a girl. And we really were close for a while. And now that my son is 7, girls are gross. Right. They have cooties, you understand. They're no longer on the invitation list. And I had to have a very difficult conversation. I was like, I'm going to invite her because I like her mom a lot. Yes. And she's the sweetest little girl. And you will just live with it. But it is a balance when it comes to that
I've
relationship development.
I've had a similar conversation with my youngest where I'm like, y'all stay. You have to be friends because I really like your mom, and they're fine. And I think they're 11 and 12 now, so we're hitting that like they're in middle school and things are different and they're finding different friends. But I'm like, but we're still gonna connect. Like we just went sledding yesterday. Like we still have to connect with that family. Yeah. But I mean, it's hard when the kid's like, no, I don't like that kid anymore, and you're like, darn it, like I really liked the mom.
Something I see, I think you guys are all speaking to. It's a few different things. It takes some courage, right, to make that reach. Sometimes we wait and wonder, why are other people not reaching out to me, or why is this friend? Maybe we question that, but sometimes all we got to do is make the invitation ourselves. So I think it's a couple things. It's courage, having courage to reach someone, to do that. And another thing, I feel like it's the wonder in mutual connections, right? So meeting someone at an Easter egg hunt or through work, right? It's some of my best friends I have in my life now. I've met them through another friend of mine, because there's a good chance that the people that a friend of yours is friends with, that you'll also get along with those connections, right? You know, you like certain things about a person you're friends with. You might like their friends too, and there's a good chance they'll appreciate you as well. So I think those are a couple pieces, right? That having the courage to make the effort to reach out, and finding it in different areas of our lives we might not expect. Like, I think some of the most wonderful things and people in our lives come when we don't see them, or we don't see them coming. There's a really great podcaster named Mel Robbins who I was just doing some research, and she had a podcast similar to this topic about friendships and adulthood. And a sentiment she shared was, some of the best people in our lives we haven't met yet, and the most important. And but it's up to us to find those people and maybe push ourselves in different ways to find them, because that's how we'll find them. I think there's a lot of hope in that for everybody, that there's some of the most important, great people around. You just maybe haven't met them yet. I remember watching the Grammy Awards, oh my goodness, last year. And it was Billy Joel, and he hasn't written music in, I want to say, goodness, forgive me, I might be wrong, but since the 90s or early 2000s. And there's a fan who met him, that befriended him and inspired him to write a new song again. Wow. One of the greatest songwriters in history, potentially, and it took a new relationship to encourage him to write again and to make a song. I think that speaks to how powerful relationships can be and how unexpected they can be.
I think you bring up a point that is worth spending some time there, and it has to do with you mentioned the courage, and even as you were talking, it was funny to me how different our experiences at T-ball were, because you're saying like, oh, I'm talking to all the moms, I'm out there. Meanwhile, I put my chair away from everyone else. I've got my AirPods in, I'm writing emails on my laptop, which is tethered to my
That's
like
my husband.
Oh yeah.
and
He's
so
like, do we have to sit near people?
and
I
that
do.
I just hit my social limit. I'm an introverted human with a really extroverted job. And so there are times, and unfortunately, my kids kind of get the short end of the stick when it comes to me making relationships at their events. And I'm not rude. I'm not like, I will talk to you if you talk to me at these events, and I will be friendly and warm. I'll put away my laptop. We'll chat. But if you don't start it, I'm not starting it. No, not at all.
It's my husband.
But I will talk to I'm not going to go out of my way necessarily, mostly because I've sort of hit my limit for the week or for the day of my social activity. It's different if I have like a really busy day, if I have a grant due. And so I block my whole day. I work from home. I'm in front of a computer typing from 7:15 when I put my kids on the bus until 5:30 when my babysitter leaves. Like, if that's my day, then that night, if I have jujitsu with my one son or basketball with the other, I'll chat to whoever's around me. But short of that being my day, I'm to talk to a stranger? Holy shit, I don't have the emotional capacity for that. That's exhausting.
But you know what's interesting? I think, so I had worked in mental health, and then I took 5 years off to be with my youngest. So, and I don't know, you probably didn't do the whole stay at home. It's a different vibe.
I took 2 weeks off.
Yeah. And it's funny because my cousin was like, she did a year, and she's like, oh my God, I got to go back. I loved it. I love my job, but I loved it. We did all the preschool things. They knew our first name at the library. We were very involved. I preschooled him at home. It was a lot. You miss that connection with other adults. I'm talking to a 1-year-old all day, So I think, especially when he started T-ball, he started in kindergarten, and his first day in kindergarten was my first day here. So I was still in that mode of I need social interaction. Like, you know what I mean? So I was very quick to, hey, everybody, like, what, how's it going? But you saying that you're like off to the side, that is literally my husband. We are so opposite. And I played sports. So I'm like, listen, you got to interact with the other parents. Like, you're going to look like a jerk if you're sitting 90 miles away, like, with the other team. Like, you have to at least sit with our team. And now he's gotten it and he talks to some of the other parents and stuff, but he'd be fine not. I'm like, okay, guys, we have to stop talking. The game is starting. I'm like, we have to pay attention to our kids. Like,
See, it's interesting because my one new friend that I made, I don't think I would have met her were it not for me being on medical leave. Because I was so lonely. Because my husband's going to work every day, and it's just me and the cats, and I'm like,
so you almost had that. You were a stay-at-home cat mom.
I was so lonely. So then that's why I was like, hey, we've never hung
Adult
out.
conversation.
We've never hung out, but do you want to come do yoga? Like the lowest impact yoga, because I ain't got it like that. And I definitely don't think I would have had the courage or the bravery to reach out to her if I were getting again, because I have an extroverted job, but I'm an introvert. So it's like at work, I'm very dynamic and engaged, but then when I get home, I want to be quiet. And if I go to a new social event and I don't know what to expect, I'm human. Doesn't matter that I'm a therapist. I still get nervous. Like, ooh, I don't want to. So then I just, be quiet, be shy a little bit. But then when somebody reaches out to me and I'm like, hey, it's the rest of my personality. So there's definitely that element of courage, but also kind of being pushed to that point of like
Courage and
desperation.
desperation.
Right, I was gonna
It
say,
sounds like a nice combination of the two.
Yes.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think that must be at least part of it. I also am in a unique role in that I don't really get to make friends at work because of my role.
Yeah.
It's different. I used to joke years and years and years ago because when I first started back at PCS, I wasn't in the role I am now. But I was still I came back in as almost like the unofficial team lead at Ren. That wasn't my title, but that's kind of what I did. And I onboarded new people and started people out. And somebody had moved to Lebanon for the job. And I remember, like, she was lonely. I had just moved back from Texas. I was helping her get started. And I was like, well, hey, like, she's lonely. I'm pretty lonely. I don't really know people here yet. Like, let's go out. Let's have a drink. So we did. And then we started hanging out. And then I had to fire her. Like, long story short, that's how that story
Did the friendship
ends.
survive?
No.
I had a feeling not.
No. No, it did not.
That's a shame.
And so it was just like, I think early on that put it in one. And then also, I mean, I've been here now 13 years since I've returned back and in my role. And there are times where you talked about like situational work friendships. And I think I have quite a few like friendly work relationships. But I always have a moment where once they leave, I don't know how they really felt based on my position and my power within the room. And so I always have that moment of like, once you leave, then I'll know if we were really friends. And there are some folks that I've kept in touch with. I just had lunch 2 weeks ago with somebody who worked in our Lebanon school-based program forever, actually. No, it's Amy.
Oh, Amy. Okay, I was just curious.
And we reached out and we're like, we should be friends. And she's like, yeah, we should be friends. I was like, then let's do it.
Doing the stay-at-home mom
And
thing,
she's doing the stay-at-home mom thing. So she might be desperate enough to be my friend now, as it turns out.
So it works out.
There we go. But it just is, even those friendship relationships, like depending on what your role is or kind of depending on how their role at work goes or some of those different things, it can really create different layers of nuance that I didn't expect. I've also, like, as an employer, watched friendships emerge and seen somebody who's like a rock star at their job slowly become less of a rock star. You see that a lot in family-based, like in teaming, kind of depending on, you watch these friendships start to, honestly, I've seen marriages evolve out of family-based as well, teaming. Like, some of those teams get real close. Right. But you watch sort of them shift and evolve and change, and sometimes to this beautiful thing, and then sometimes like, ugh, I don't know if that's helping each other in that role. So work is a tough place for
I
it.
think you guys have shared, there's maybe been teams that have gotten married that,
Yes.
that have really fallen for each other, and
they
how,
still work
how wonderful is that?
I had a
that
feeling
can
not.
happen?
I was just
Right, that, and I think you might have mentioned that too, that changes things. But
Once they disclose that they're in a romantic
Sure.
partnership, we
Yeah.
end their work partnership
Sad.
yeah,
for obvious reasons.
Right.
Thank you for sharing that point, though, because from my perspective, I haven't been a supervisor role in my career, and it's really fascinating thinking of the nuanced things that happen there. You might have a strong connection with someone, and I could see the concerns of if things professionally don't work out, how you may be in a position where you'd have to fire someone, and how that would be hard. So I've talked to many folks who are in leadership roles and have that trouble of getting that social connection out of work because of the kind of the power dynamic there and the leadership they have there. So I think for everyone, it's finding where can you find those relationships. If it's really tough to find that in your direct work, where can that be? A good friend of mine in youth ministry is a really good sentiment from him is faith is something that is an example of something that maybe it's harder to outgrow that. Like if you're friends with someone who is a coworker or you go to college with, on a sport team with them, you have those mutual those things that make you similar, right? Or those things you share with them. So finding something, if it's the relationship itself, if it's focusing on that connection to the other person, just ways that we can find those things that are similar and those things that we love about the people in our lives that is sustaining through like the different seasons of our lives. I think it's wonderful hearing from you guys about meeting people in different spaces, and even though those situations maybe families or you outgrow them, it's just so powerful to hear that there's a willingness to still try to reach that person, to reach to that person that we don't work with anymore. Because I think another big point here is with that the courage piece too is it takes a lot of effort. Adult relationships. Yeah. And I think Kim, as you shared, you go to work, you want to, be your best self for work, right? And then your family, you come home, that's like a different part of you that you want to serve your family well and be who you are for your family. And then to be a friend, that's another role we take on. Another way to look at it is if you look at yourself like a cup of water and you try to pour that cup of water into someone else's cup who's empty. We also need our cups filled, right? And that's a wonderful thing about adult friendships is even if it's a text or a quick check-in or giving a friend a call or they give you a call, making sure that someone's helping you too, right? That in all the roles you're serving, if you're filling others' cups, that people are also filling yours and finding ways that can happen.
I find myself often wondering about this like juxtaposition between the friendships developed in adulthood versus those childhood friendships that last the test of time. And I actually spent a little bit of time researching that particular dynamic. And it was funny because the data is super split. Like some of the research really said that those childhood friendships very specifically bring with them like a unique sense of nostalgia and rootedness. They understand your history and narrative. There tends to be a greater level of commitment with childhood friends. So like you've been through so much together that you're willing to put up with a bit more in adulthood versus friendships that as you meet them in adulthood, you may be less tolerant of some of those pieces because you don't have the history there to kind of make sense of it or contextualize it. Alternatively, they talked about friendships formed in adulthood, how there's some unique pieces to that we really need both to have the most fruitful like life circumstances. With those friendships maintained in adulthood, having more current interests, having a more mature connection. So those like childhood friendships that tend to last into adulthood tend to have more like silliness, play. It like some of those aspects of the friendship hang on, which I thought was really interesting.
It
like
is, yeah.
you don't necessarily drop them as much, so you're going to be like sillier and goofier and more childlike in your childhood friendships, even though you're an adult. And it is really funny to watch that like once I read that and now noticing myself like I had a friend that I saw for the first time in a long time, but he was one of my childhood friends. And I ran up and I just jumped on his back. And my husband's like, "What is wrong with you? When do you do that?"
Oh, I get it.
And I was like, "I know, but that's how I always greeted him." And like,
Funny.
for 20 years, and that's just what I do. I don't know. And so my husband's laughing at me, and my dad's like, "When do you just jump on someone?" And I was like, "Well, I guess I do now. I don't know." But I didn't ever notice until I read this data point. And then with our adult friendships, it tends to expand our social circles as well as being more congruent with our current goals and life circumstances, which I thought was interesting. And so I guess that what that leads me to, or where that question, or what I'm most curious about, is how do we recognize when those childhood relationships are like, obviously I jump on your back, it's fine, we're good. But are there certain behaviors, like I'm thinking about my clients that have struggled with substance use disorders, that have had the same friend group for many years. There's a lot of drug addiction and drug use within that friend group. They have a lot of loyalty, connection. They've got that history together, so they're reluctant to boundary those relationships or even put distance there. They also don't have other friend groups that are more conducive to recovery, so they can boundary, but then they're isolated. And so I guess, how do we know when those relationships no longer serve us, or how do we?
And it's interesting because apparently I'm not super mentally healthy, but I don't have any friends from childhood. Like, I have outgrown them, and I'm a very different person now. Like, I have been through some things. So like, and a couple of them moved away. And I think for me, I've made a lot of friends in like early 20s. Those I've stayed connected with, but like childhood, not so much. And I think for me, once it became almost a burden, like, I mean, it's always hard to schedule things. Like, we're adults. So like my one friend, we worked together years ago, and we joke that we have a trauma bond. I shared with you before that I worked in a very bad position. Like, the kids were violent, and we would get hurt, and like one broke my ankle. Like, it was brutal. So we have a trauma bond, but we will have to schedule a month out. Like, and it's not that we don't want to see each other. It's, hey, I know you're busy, I'm busy too, let's make this work. But I never look at that like as a burden. Like, there was some from childhood where I'm like, can I make an excuse? Like, it just wasn't serving me in that season anymore. So those have kind of fallen, and I'm okay with that. Like, I don't feel like I'm missing out. Like, sometimes I'm like, man, that was fun, but we're not those people anymore. So I don't know.
Yeah.
All my friends are from adulthood, pretty much.
I've had the opposite experience.
Yeah.
So I have two best friends. We've been best friends since 11th grade, 10th grade.
I love that.
And we talk every day. Like, multiple times every day. And granted, it's not always a phone call. Like, we're not phone call type of friends unless it's like a once monthly deep check-in or somebody's going through something major. But we're millennials. We meme all day, every day. We have our texting, our Snap, our Facebook, our Insta, and just on different platforms, we have different communication. But our main like true friendship communication that's actual like words instead of a meme is like on our Snap, because you can see when somebody's replying. So then you kind of get to it and get it in real time. And it's throughout all of our life changes, we've been kind of keeping each other involved and getting feedback and being really honest. Like, the three of us, we don't lie to each other. We call out what it is. One of us was in a really terrible romantic relationship, and the two of us could see that the one of us was like really self-destructive, but it's okay. Like, I love her enough to be honest with her, but you also have to say it in a way that is going to be not only received well, but be appropriately like empathetic. And we've navigated those things. And then sometimes, you get in a bad mood and you have to deal with your healthy conflict. And it's always like, oh, my bad, dude. Like,
That was on me.
Yikes.
Yeah.
we all have different faiths. We all have different perspectives on marriage. We all have different political views. Like, we do not agree on those core things that have ripped so many other relationships apart. And we're just like, look, you do you, I do me, but we're not doing the same thing, but like we can be together on these other topics.
And I think childhood friendships allow for that. I feel like in adulthood, the more, like you talked about, like core differences in beliefs, in like some pretty deep, like more identity forming type ways. And I think that childhood friendships lend to that far better than adult friendships do. I feel like in adulthood, if you see things differently on a whole host of different topics, I mean, right? I mean, well, we just had an election. Like, this is not the time. And I won't go there today in any capacity. However, I think we're becoming increasingly less tolerant of people with different beliefs than we do. And I think that might even impede our ability, because sort of the way you're telling it, you've got these two relationships. They're extremely beneficial to you. They feed your soul, for lack of a better way to say it. Your beliefs are quite different from theirs, and I wonder if you'd met them tomorrow,
That's a great point.
if that same level of depth could emerge. And so I don't know how much of that is, as we get older, we get less flexible, we get more judgmental, we get more like we start clinging more tightly to the things that we believe and are important to us. And even as we're talking about that, like I feel like I fall on one side of the political spectrum. We just spent 5 days with my husband's family, where literally every single member of that family that I was with for 4.5 days believes very strongly on a different side of the political spectrum. We were together for 4.5 days. We didn't talk about it. We didn't go there. Like, we know that we love each other enough that we're not going to go there. We also know that there's no series of words that either of us could say that would change the other person's mind. So we like live and let live there and move on. But I don't know that friendships, where it comes to big things like politics, faith, children, no children, marriage, like some of those different things. When it comes to adult relationships, do we give each other that same grace and individuality? My hypothesis is no, but I don't really have anything to support it.
I think food for the soul is a wonderful way to put it. I think the relationships that you have that serve you or feed you in that way are really important. Maybe part of it is the child in us is more vulnerable when we're more open, and there's different sides to that too. But as children, we have this openness, and maybe the adult in us, when we go through our lives, that's harder for us to unlock. Working with teenagers and adolescents, it's amazing seeing how fast strong friendships can happen in a weekend, in a week. It's wonderful seeing it, and maybe those friendships we develop when we're in our transformative years, when we have that vulnerability with each other, that's why that can feel different. Yeah, I think what I'm hearing from your end too is it sounds like that honesty amongst your friend group through the different versions of you and the different seasons of your lives. It sounds like that's the piece of it that's been different, right? That's the part that maybe you haven't outgrown with each other, is that honesty with each other. So I think that's a fascinating part of it to me, is how wonderful children are able to develop these amazing big friendships in such fast amount of time. But then is it about age, or is it about our environment and how we feel fed, the type of community we can grow and be a part of? So I think part of it is finding communities, finding people who help unlock that child in us, that keep us open and vulnerable. Just something I see.
Well, the honesty, not to cut you off, the honesty part, though, I think is probably why that statistic comes about. Because when you think about today's culture, everything has to be PC, politically correct, right? So if, if we don't know each other, I'm going to tread really lightly on what I say about a variety of controversial topics. So that, number one, serves as a barrier for us to get any closer. But number two, then it's my kind of way of filtering out, like, ooh, do I really want to be friends? Do I want to go there? Do I want the friendship where we just don't ever talk about anything controversial? Or do I want the kind of friendship that we, are we okay agreeing to disagree, or do we need to be similar? I think when you have friends who you've had for a long time and you've decided that the newer controversial things don't matter as much because you already like made your soul connection. So it's like when we were kids, we weren't talking about politics. We didn't care. We didn't know. None of us knew if we wanted to get married, whatever. And then as we grew up, all of us just kind of did our different things. We were like, nah, you're important enough. Like, and the three of us, we can agree to disagree. But like, think about, like my new friend who, my cat lady friend, right? I think for her, we bonded on something like other than like our political views or whatever. And I think we were lucky that we were similar. But I'm curious now, hearing these statistics and really thinking about it, I'm curious, like if she were to say she were on the complete other spectrum, would I have opened myself to being as close to her? Would I have felt inhibited? Or like a fear of judgment here, or I think the fear of judgment.
Yeah. Well, I think the honesty thing too, that is a big thing, because I don't know how you guys are, but like I present differently depending on the environment, depending on, you know what I mean? And I'm always I think just the way I grew up and like a lot of my like past, I was very surface. I didn't know if I could let me out, like full me. I mean, like my husband sees full me and he loves me anyway. So it's not that bad. But there's a lot of friends where I'm like, yeah, we're not going to talk about religion, politics, all the things, because I don't want to not be your friend. And I'm worried that could happen. But it's funny. My best friend, the one that I met through PCS, we joke, like, how did we feel like lifetime friends? And we've only been friends like 4 or 5 years. But we can do that. We can call each other out. We feel like it. We joke that, we listen, we don't judge. But sometimes we judge. And then we say, like, this is not, what are you doing? But I think that's hard to find as an adult, because we don't have that shared history and those connections. And we've formed our personalities by this time. So, yeah, I think and that's how I said she's a lifer, because she's seen me and still talks to me. Like, she's seen all the pieces and she's good. So that's interesting.
I think there's a balance when the points of overlap, though, will outweigh the points of disconnection, or like I don't know. I'm thinking about it was actually a friendship that I developed during the pandemic when we were very, very isolated. And so I keep chickens. Everyone knows it. I love my chickens. That's Goose up there.
I was wondering his name.
In this season, we've got Goose. And so I do the chicken thing, and I ended up making a friend with this woman who's got to be in her 70s, that also keeps chickens. And she would come over to my house, and we would sit on my back porch, like 10 feet away from each other, and just talk. And again, we have very different beliefs on probably from start to finish, on a whole host of different topics, but we never really talked about any of those things. We talked about chickens. And we talked about this chicken and that chicken and this chicken genetic and how do we get green eggs and dark green egg layers and all the different things. And I mean, we still talk, I would say once a week, maybe twice a week. She's had some medical stuff, so we're not as connected. But my husband has always made fun of me. He's like, so you're the only person I know that, in her late 30s, befriended a 70-year-old about chickens. And not only that, but invited her to our house to sit on our porch.
You were very desperate for.
I was very desperate for like a friend that wanted to talk about chickens. My husband didn't want to. It's not common in my friend group. So I wanted a chicken friend, and I found one.
I think it makes so much sense, because I think about the whole idea, right, again, of what are the things that you don't outgrow. Mutual interest.
Yeah.
Doesn't really matter the age, 30 and 70. Both love chickens.
She was also a San Antonio Spurs fan.
Oh, well,
so
that, hey,
helped.
two mutual
So we had like basketball
gosh.
and chickens.
Yeah, right. If it's finding those things as a centerpiece. I go to a lot of concerts. I'll go with my sister. It's something we enjoy doing, and you can turn to somebody and you know that they're going to know most of the songs that concert that performer is or band is that they're going to perform. And that's all it can take. That's like the catalyst to like a coworker, a cat watcher. If that's sometimes that's all we need. Knowing, identifying that interest, and I think about professionally, right, with working with families and encouraging them to think of their natural supports and who they may identify that as. Now I'm thinking more about that. I mean, making it simple, like who are people, what are your interests? How can you connect with somebody that has that same interest? That could lead to wild possibilities, right? So there's just there's a lot that's empowering there about how a mutual interest can overcome so many barriers. I mean, maybe care and relationship can mean more than conflict. Maybe we need some of that right now.
You talked about earlier, and then we went a different direction, but I thought you talked about trust of littles, like how little ones can
Yeah.
make friends within a weekend. They go to like a weekend
yes.
church camp and they come back with a lifelong friend, or different things. And I think trust is a piece there, but I also think there's a vulnerability component to it that little ones are much less attuned, perhaps, especially like the smaller that like my 6-year-old has no fear of anything. But I've also noticed recently that my husband and I have done a much worse job in fostering and nurturing his friendships compared to my oldest son's friendships, because my oldest son, some of those relationships were prior to COVID. My youngest was 1.5 when COVID came. So like relationships were different there, but it was really salient a couple weeks ago when my oldest invited a friend over and my youngest went through like the 2 friends whose parents' phone numbers we actually had. And like they were both busy. And then it's not fair. I don't have a friend. So I was like, well, buddy, maybe tomorrow at jujitsu, you can make a friend and we can get his parents' phone number. And when we leave, then the next time we have a 3rd friend to call because your first 2, they were doing other things. Next day, we went to jujitsu. By the time we left, he had gone up to this kid's dad and been like, "Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt you in your conversation. Would you please come give me your son's phone number to my mom so that the next time I have a play date, I can invite your son?" And I'm like, holy shit. Like
Very formal.
meanwhile, yeah, first of all,
brave.
the dad came over. He's like, what nice manners your son has.
Absolutely.
But then also, like, I would never in a million years. Meanwhile, I'm at like the 4-hour thing next to a mom that we are getting along fine. I didn't at the end be like, can I have your phone number so the next time I have a play date, I can call you? No, like it was like, see ya. That's how it ended. And I just think there's that vulnerability. There's that trust. That's almost like from the mouth of babes. He's like, I'm gonna put myself out there. And if I get rejected, I'm
Try
good.
again, though.
And he'll just try again.
As adults, it hits us hard.
It
like
hits
if you're like,
hard.
do you want to be friends? No.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if someone just looked at you
Oh.
and said, no, thank you. I
It
don't think I want
rocks
to.
our
You're like, what?
identity sometimes.
Yeah.
It's
The kid's like, I'll go to the next one. It's fine. Like
Sure.
you would have asked someone else.
Yeah, and you would have.
Right.
Well, and the big difference with kids
Yeah.
too, it's so much about quantity. A lot of kids are focused on how many people are coming to my birthday party?
Right.
How many people do I know? How many Facebook friends do I have? And in adulthood, we're not really looking to have a large quantity. We're looking for a
Quality.
few quality. And that I think is what's causing us to like sift out these other candidates, if we want to call it, friend candidates. And it's like, well, nah, you're not really kind of fitting my criteria in adulthood. I'm good. And it may make you say, no, I don't want to be your friend.
I couldn't personally do that. I'd be the one, sure. And then I'd be like, now what? Like, we're going to go hang out. And I'd be like, this is awkward. But
I mean, one can be plenty, right? That you can be you can feel lonely in a room full of people dancing, and you can talk to one, and that can make all the difference. And I think another thing too is this difference of right? The romantic relationship versus platonic or not that, and how wonderful the difference there is, and how maybe that's harder when we get older because of commitment and to our families, as we were talking about earlier, right? The different roles we serve and what that is. I think about my mom, her college roommate. They they haven't lived together in so many years, and they still keep. How wonderful it is that through all those seasons they can still have that friendship. And I think another point I'd make too is just a wonderful point of friendship in general, I guess, is a lot of the areas of our lives, family, work. There's maybe like some transaction in things where it's, we feel a calling to take care of our family, and as we love them to the ends of the earth, and with our work, we want to do our best and earn and serve well and that sort of thing. But friendship can be different. It's just people choose us and we choose them, right? And they fill us, and that's like how the soul part of us. Our friends can love us as we are through all the seasons, right? Through the tough parts of us and the parts that aren't as tough. I just think that gives me a really, really cool feeling. The aspect of it it's the friendship can be really non-transactional, that it's just something where we just spend that time with someone because we like how that feels, and you're mutually choosing that.
I wonder about, you touched on briefly in there this concept of like the best friend, or having that one friend
Yeah.
versus multiple or more diverse friend groups. And I've often found that's interesting because I run into, I don't know, I've had a lot of therapy sessions. I'm sure as a school-based provider you have as well. Like, I have friends, but I don't have a best friend. And I think especially when we're young, or the more young, like the younger we are, the more value that's placed on that like best friend. And as we've gotten older, I feel like maybe the depth of some of my relationships has changed in certain ways. And truthfully, like, it's cliche, but my best friend is my husband. I married my best friend. We are, roommates, co-parents, best friends, and romantic partners. Like, we have all those things. And I'm fortunate in that I still really like my husband after being married to him for a while. So I know that's not the case for everyone, but I would say like 85% of the time I still enjoy his company, which I think is pretty good for 14 years.
Yeah.
I wonder about, for folks who maybe their romantic partnership doesn't fulfill that piece, is there a downside to not having like a BFF, like the one, versus having multiple, less deep but more breadth of support? And the research was really mixed, actually, when I looked into it. Basically what it came up with, especially when we're younger, like childhood and adolescence, that single friendship, one close friend, is hugely protective on a whole host of different things, from like academic performance to mental health. As we get older, the best friend seems to have less power, but I found myself wondering if it's not mitigated by the romantic partnerships that tend to emerge as we get older and things like that. So I don't know, thoughts on the best friend versus the friend group or multiple friend groups when it comes to serving our own wellness.
So another thing that came out of, or something that really struck me in Mel Robbins' podcast on this topic is who are your 2 a.m. friends, which means who's someone that at 2 a.m. You could call, and that doesn't mean necessarily about an emergency, like just someone to talk to something about. And I think so there's power in that, right? That identifying in your mind who is that person or who can those people be. But there's value in friends who aren't like a 2 a.m. friend, who maybe every now and then you catch up with, or you just have some similar things you like, or there's different like lengths you can go with that person. So I think too there's such a value in community, right? And community is typically more than two people, right? It's people gathering around something. Again, it kind of comes back to mutual interest or belief, right? And with that, that sense of community can be stronger than the things that we disagree about, right? That people in that community can have things they don't see eye to eye on or they disagree about. But in that shared fellowship or sense of community, you feel stronger. You can feel loved. You can find support in things you believe in and like. So I feel like aside from that point of a best friend, having that sense of friends, sense of belonging to something, community. I mean, it's however people can find it. Like, there's so many. I think I'm in a few Facebook groups about like favorite sodas and TV shows, and it's silly. These people that I might never talk to in person or even online, but it's just this thing that these different things that draw us together. So I think that's another part of it too, right? That value of community, how it helps you feel a part of something, how it's something bigger than yourself. And that maybe that's something that's bigger than that best friend or different from that best friend, I should say, is that sense of something bigger than you that you can be a part of.
I think I've always viewed it differently. I don't believe that people should only have one best friend. I do think it's possible to have that kind of, like, the best it is a lot of times like your closest, so you trust them with your secrets, and you go to them. I don't think you are stuck with just one, but I do think, even in terms of when we think about early recovery, when we're helping our clients do that, a lot of times they're cutting off a whole slew of people who are not supportive to their recovery. And when we're coming up with a relapse prevention plan, what do we need? 3 social contacts. Why? Because if you call one and they're busy and you're feeling like you're in crisis, you need to have a backup. And when your backup is busy, you need to have a third. And they don't all necessarily need to be best, but they need to be close enough, because you might not necessarily call your soda Facebook friend when you're feeling like you're having an emotional crisis. And I don't mean to take that group, I don't mean to make your group seem less important. I just think we need some sort of depth. Yes, a depth of relationship. And I do think you need to have more than one, especially if we're talking about like acute emotional distress, like your spouse just died. Like I've been going through like a lot of acute emotional distress lately, because we've just had like 5 back-to-back deaths in our family. And it's just been tough. And you compartmentalize for work, and you get home and you have to let these emotions out. And I called my first 2, and they were both busy. And thank God I had my third, because my husband was at work and I didn't want to call him sobbing, but thank God I had my third, because I really needed that emotional outlet. And I think I call all 3 of them my best, but I think you might actually have a different perspective, though, because you said you have your one best.
Well, so it's funny because I didn't have a best friend growing up, and it does feel like you're missing out. Like, I would have friends that are like, that's my best, like my ride or die. And I'm like, that must be nice. I didn't have that. I will say my mom and I are beyond tight. Like, I would classify her as one of my best friends. But then I met my husband when I was 19, and we are like you and your husband. We do all the things together. We go to shows. He plays live music. I sell his merch. Like, we are like, real tight. Yeah. And like, we like all the same shows, and like, we're good. So I'm like, okay, I got my mom, I got my husband, I'm good. But I was missing that female connection, which I thought I didn't need. And I mean, now that I have it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was missing, we can text and all the things, and we can, parenting and everything. So I agree with you. I think you can have multiple best friends, and that's fine. But I don't think, would I still be okay if now that I've met her, I'd be heartbroken, not like being able to have that connection. But I think I would have done okay as an adult not having a best friend, because like my husband, my mom, people filled those roles for me in a way. But yeah, that's interesting.
But I've discovered, at least with women, maybe less so with men, and maybe not. You might say like, oh no, dudes are the same way. But I've had a lot of male clients. Rarely does it come up. Like, I'm really jealous of my friend's friend with men. But I hear it with women quite a bit, where women might struggle a little bit more with the, no, she's my best friend, she can't be your best friend, like, kind of thing.
Well, and you brought up, is this relationship still like serving me?
Yeah.
Right? And I think that kind of comes back to whatever lens we use to filter out, because I know for me, when somebody, like, I feel friendly towards them, but then they start exhibiting some kind of codependent behavior. And I remember what it was like in college to have that kind of like soul sucking
No.
friend. And I was giving so much of my energy. And when I tell you, and I graduated college and moved away, how I felt so terrible for saying it, but I was relieved that I wasn't still her friend, because I felt like my soul was being sucked. So then, you may work with some people or maybe at church and somebody's like latching onto you, and it's just, how do I keep this kind of healthy separation here? Because I can also see that relationship may not be one that's going to be serving me, or it's maybe going to be sucking more from my cup than I'm able to backfill. And that's kind of difficult too. And I think I struggle with, and maybe I'm the only one, maybe not, but I think I struggle with kind of feeling badly. Am I being like unduly harsh? Am I being judgmental? Am I more so, am I being judgmental, and do I think I'm better than people? And it's like, no, I think I've learned my boundaries now, and I need to keep that healthy distance.
No,
with
the
some
emotionally
people.
needy friend will never be my friend. I just, and because I'm at max capacity, like I've got a 6 and a 9-year-old who need a lot of help co-regulating their emotions. I have a job that is extremely emotionally taxing. And I have a role within my job where I'm a supervisor, where a lot of my job is helping co-regulate emotion. And so I had one friend that I had met in like a mom group, and very quickly I realized, oh no, like this is like, you just hear the sucking sound start. Like I was like, nope on a rope, lose my number. I'm sorry, our kids can't be friends, but it's exhausting.
And maybe that capacity is something that earlier, younger clinicians don't know yet, or a lot of young adults I know, young people entering the field or who are interested in the fields, they have such a caring heart, and they want to give, and it's hard to distinguish like putting that into your friendships, and then when you can begin your career and having a job, kind of have that balance. Like you can go to work and show up for our clients and serve them in the way we do. But knowing that in the relationships, we help each other and love each other and get through things. But again, that as you said, that like sucking sound of all of it taking out of you, you need to receive as well. And I think something that y'all are all speaking to, I have many friends this way as well. It's sometimes it happens in ways, I think as we were speaking to before, we never expect. Just we find people and we didn't, it's like we didn't make it happen. We just find them. And I think there's something special to that too, right? It's like not something we maybe even intend. So that's almost like a counterpoint to the idea of effort. Is sometimes great friendships, there's effort there, but maybe it doesn't feel like effort because it just feels right. And we find those people. But to bring it back to the point of clinically, I think it's learning that to serve those you serve and help, you have to also have boundaries and to take care of yourself to be your best self for others, right? Part of learning how to grow and challenge yourself as a clinician is to know where your barriers are and how to work on that and how to take care of yourself professionally and personally.
I think you often learn where those boundaries are the hard way, too. I think, 'cause
Yeah.
even as you were
Yep.
talking, like early in the field, catch me in my early 20s, I would have definitely befriended this other woman. I would have definitely
Yep.
loaned her rent money or given her a ride 20 times or been on the phone with her at 3 in the morning when I had to get up at 6 for work as she's crying about, a nothing burger. Like I totally would have done literally all of those things and then probably a few other codependent behaviors as well. I'm now at a season of my life where I can see it, and it almost gets that like the ick, like the bristling of my back. I'm like, nope, not gonna. Or you can almost smell it come around the corner, and that's where I put in my AirPods and eyes front and create a little bit more distance in those spaces.
We ask, are we helping or are we like enabling more, right? Because part of it is, I think, goodness, someone said it in such a profound way. I think it might have been one of my supervisors, but sometimes, or in a training or somewhere wonderful, but it was sometimes the things that people go through, they're almost like a self-perpetrator, right? In what they are, and where their struggle is, and like I think with family-based therapy, if we use funds to help out a family or we want to support them in different ways, we always try to find a solution for how can this be more sustainable? How can the family pursue this resource themselves? What are after discharge? What are things they can lean into? Because I think sometimes helping others is helping them learn how to do it for themselves, right? I just think it comes back to learning that over time and knowing to challenge ourselves as clinicians. Like there's so many times where I might want to make a strong connection with a teenager I work with in this field and play a game with them or help advocate for them. But really what I need to be doing is helping the caregivers do that and helping them grow that relationship they have. So yeah, I think really tying it all back to friendship, it's kind of knowing where your boundaries are, where part of it turns to people need to help themselves too, and we can still be their friends. I know I kind of went in a lot of directions there,
No, yeah.
but it just makes me think a lot about how clinically there's a balance, right, to want to help and what that looks like.
I think. No, go ahead.
You made a really good point. Like most of us have gotten into this field because we aren't empathetic, and we that does fill something for us. Me being able to help people that I wouldn't be here otherwise. Yeah. But I think, like many of you touched on, if you're not getting that back, like I'm not your therapist.
Yeah.
And that becomes a role, especially with my like surface friends, where I'm like, we're at T-ball or whatever, and they're like, "What do you do for a living?" And I'm like, "Oh, can I just say I'm like a mortician? Can I just make something up so they don't follow up questions?" But I'm like, "Oh, I'm a therapist. I have a question for you." And I'm like, and this is going nowhere because I can't, you know what I mean? But I think setting those boundaries, and we learn that as we age, because I'm sitting here thinking of a very toxic, like early 20 relationship, and I couldn't see it. I didn't know it was that toxic. And my husband was like, "Hey, this is not great for you." And it took me a long time. And I felt very guilty that I just was like, we can't continue this way. She was very immature. I had kids by that point. I became a stepmom at 19. So my life went very different. So I lost a lot of those friends that they're like, "Do you want to go out and drink?" No. Like it's bedtime for my kids. Like I have to be home. Yeah. So I think it didn't serve my season anymore. Sure. And it hurt. I didn't mourn it like you, because I mean I liked her, but we weren't we weren't that close. But I think setting that boundary, like if I'm coming home from hanging out with you in tears, this is no longer worth it. Like you're not a nice human. And it took my husband to go, "Yeah, this is not a good thing for you." But now I'm like, nope.
I feel like my husband said that for like 11 years.
Right.
And I was like,
a little
no,
bit. Yes.
you don't know what you're talking
It took
about.
some
That was
time.
the 15% of the time I didn't like him.
I'll disclose, like going on different, frankly, like first dates, and when I share, I do family-based therapy, and so some of it's jokingly, but they'll say, "Oh, I bet your family system is perfect," or I bet you're gonna look at me and like diagnose all of my situation, and I say, "Well, absolutely not. I'm not." Goodness, perfect's the last thing I would say anything about myself, and I have conflicts in my family and wonderful bonds in my family in many ways, and but yeah, it's sort of like meeting new people, new friends, that expectation of professionally. Sometimes it can be hard to disclose because you're like, I don't want people to think that I have it all figured out because this is the line of work I do. Like, absolutely not.
And I think that's unique to our field, and too, like if you have a doctor in your family, every time you bump yourself, you call your doctor, your family member who's a doctor. But I think that's like in our field, like. It's like I don't want to lie because that's not congruent with my values, but I also don't really want to tell you that I'm a therapist because I'm not your therapist.
Sure.
It's not ethical for me to be your therapist. Like I just want a friendship, or you can kind of go do your thing. But even too within our family, it's like my mom loves to call. I just want to pick your brain. I'm like, but I think you should get a therapist.
Right.
And it's just really having that boundary with your friends. And one of my friends, I guess, told her therapist that I was a therapist. And her therapist was like, well, she can't be your therapist, right?
You're not being fired. It's okay.
And she's like, yeah, like, we're friends. Like, this is why we're friends. Like, she does not do therapy for me because like that's not her role. And it was just very interesting. But I think I had the opportunity to learn that boundary before I became a therapist because I was a probation officer for 4 years.
Oh, wow.
I had to learn
Yeah.
those boundaries for quick.
Oh, my goodness.
And
Yeah.
I am really appreciative to have had that experience because then I got to start this job and I was not struggling with that, like,
You're
that
good.
part of it because I was so used to, like, nope, we gotta shut this down, we gotta shut this down, we gotta shut this down. And I feel like I was better off for it and maybe too rigid at times. And I had to learn to be more flexible as opposed to putting down that boundary. But it was, what you had said was exactly it about, like, I'm not your therapist. Like,
Right. But I think it's really, sorry, real quick. I think it's really funny that you said some people will be like, are you judging me? Are you this or that? I actually sat down and it was one of my we were at a show. It was one of my husband's bandmates' girlfriend at the time. And she asked me what I did. And I told her I'm a therapist. And she goes, okay. And walked away. Would not engage. And I was like, well, that's a red flag. But it was interesting. And then of course I'm like, oh, I wonder why.
What she experienced.
And I think
maybe
she
that-
felt like I was going to, and I'm like, listen, I'm not getting paid to do this. Like, I
Sure,
don't,
yeah.
you do you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's very interesting that you said that. Like, you're going to
Yeah,
judge me?
right. It's what people's idea of a therapy is and how they receive that.
I always set the expectation, and I truly don't have like every once in a while family will try to cross that line. Very rarely will friends. And my rule is always I will talk to you about the system. So if you need support on navigating, like my kid was just diagnosed with autism, what do I do next?
Right.
Like I can give you resources. I can help you navigate systemically the mental health system in the state of Pennsylvania, which is extremely imperfect. And I'm happy to help with those things. Or like I had a friend recently whose oldest ended up inpatient at not an RTF, but like some sort of residential mental health treatment facility. And they asked me, they're like, well, they took her phone and they won't let her call home except for like, is that normal? And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of like a prison. It's about safety. But like, so I will speak to you about the system. I will not talk to you about your story from the perspective of a provider, of the perspective. And I've had sort of, but it's funny, you talk about like first dates and saying that you were a therapist. And one of my worst first dates of my entire life was with a guy that didn't know I was a therapist, didn't know what I did for a living. It's when I worked almost exclusively with problematic sexual behavior and community reentry. And we went to a concert at a bar, and my client was there. One of my clients was there and approached my date and was like, oh my goodness, your girlfriend. How? And first of all, like, I'm not his girlfriend. I don't think this is even going anywhere an hour in, but cool, whatever. And then your girlfriend has helped me so much. I used to fantasize about my grandkids and like just like dumps it, like trauma dumps all of these things. And so very early on, I discovered that I should probably tell you what I do for a living. And I might need to tell you the population that I work with as well, because it could get real weird real fast. And people tend to be, they have biases about people being therapists, and then probably doubly so when it's like, oh, I work with, Megan's Law offenders, and I work with family-based, and I work with drug and alcohol, and that sometimes I have like a drink in my hand when I'm saying it, and people are like, you do what now? Like, and you drink? And it's like, yeah, but I don't drink problematically. Right. All these different layers, and I think even then our work impedes our ability to connect to others based on their beliefs about what we do, and then our own introversion and kind of our own social challenges there as well, I think, can get in the way. So we did have some questions submitted for today, and just a reminder that our listeners can always submit questions to any of our upcoming topics. So we do have a couple of again, season 3 of the How to Be Happy Hour is going to focus exclusively on relationships and different types of relationships, and then how those relationships take us closer to or further away from our own quest of happiness. And so we have some upcoming topics. We're going to talk about romantic relationships. We're talking about dating apps. I am so excited. I am so excited to talk about the apps. We have another topic coming up about the therapeutic relationship. We're going to look at it from the side of the therapist. We're also going to look at it as the side of a client because many of us in this field have had both experiences on either side of the couch. So if you have any questions for those upcoming topics, go ahead and send them my way. But one of the questions that was submitted for here today that I thought was really interesting, we haven't really arrived at it naturally. So my question for y'all is, what role does social media play in our modern friendships? And where does it serve us? And then where does it hinder those connections?
An episode in
Whole
itself.
episode, yeah.
Sure could.
Whoa.
I mean, for me, social
Wow,
media has been
yeah.
great in my friendships. I tell you, like, I talk to my 3 girls on 5 different apps
Yeah.
all the time. But it's, I think a generational divide here is like there's so much communication in memes that like my parents cannot understand. And we talk about it all the time and they're like, why are you saying this?
Languages.
But it is a whole
Yeah.
level of communication. It's actually how I connect with my brother too. And my brother's younger than I am by 4 years. But with my best friends, like we, our memes are partially about our love for each other, partially about the books that we read, partially about, sometimes like you really don't want to go to work and it's like how I show up to Monday. Like, and so it adds an element of humor there, but it also helps with the distance. We went from friends who all lived in the same block and now we have one in Maryland, one in Texas, and one an hour and a half away.
Yep.
And our social media allows us to still connect, and it doesn't matter if you have self-service. You can be overseas, but you still got Wi-Fi, and now all your apps are working, and you can still communicate or use that as your phone. So I'm all for the apps and friendship, but I think the apps also allow for a lot of online pettiness, and especially through political season, what people post can I think make or break some friendships. So I know for me, I just don't go there on my social media ever.
Right, don't go to
I
that
actually don't even
area of
post
it.
beyond like a once a year, like happy anniversary to my lovely husband, and then like nothing else. So.
I think it's funny too. Like we're a different generation, but I meme it up. My husband, like I send him all the things, and he'll send it back. But I'm definitely like, go, 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 and he's like, dude, we were away for 3 minutes. Like, you walked back to get in the shower. How do I have 7 things to read? And I'm like, sorry for my friendship. Like, I'm so sorry that I love you. But I do, like, I send it to him. I send it to my other friends. But I think the social media aspect, though, like, besides the memeing and all those things, my husband and I just had this conversation. He's very introverted, which he's a singer in a band. You would think he's not introverted, but he really is. And he has, like, 70 friends on Facebook, and he's like, I think I'm going to narrow it down. That's just too many. And I have a lot more, but I had a lot of seasons of life. Yeah. I have my, some of the childhood friends that we still connect. I have, this workplace and this college and this grad school and like all the things.
Internships.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, how many friends do you have? I was like, I don't know, like 100. I have like 400. I'm not friends. To me, those are not, those are just Facebook. Like, you can occasionally see my post of my kids' Easter egg hunt, like, things like that.
I would come.
But thank you. I will invite you. But I think it's funny that my generation, like when Facebook started, you guys probably don't know this, you had to have a college email to even participate. Yeah, my husband didn't either, and he had to wait, and he was like, oh, I finally can get in there.
I wouldn't join Facebook at
wouldn't
first
for the
because I didn't like the
longest
poking. I thought that was weird and creepy.
Oh, that was a thing.
You used to
That
be
is
able to
weird.
poke people on
Yes.
Facebook. I actually, this is really sad and pathetic. I joined Facebook because I was running in the same friend circle as my husband. I thought he was super dreamy. And he's like, hey, what's your Facebook? And I was like, fuck Facebook. I'm not
Like, now I have to do this.
And then I joined it explicitly so that and it worked because we've now been married for a long time. But I have not found it serve my relationships really at all. And I don't communicate. Now I will, like, high school friends, like childhood friends, or like far or more distant friends. I will like send them a reel that I think like something random or this inside joke from a season of life or whatever. But there is no depth to any of my communication on the apps. Literally none. Like, you can see my dog, my chickens, picture of a whale I took maybe, but that's really it. And then other than that, it's like cat videos and
Could be the iceberg thing, right? Some folks they'll post achievements, engagements, a car, or dogs or cats. Those, I mean, goodness, pets are
it's
one of
really
the
the
greatest
only
things.
reason I'm
One
still
of the
on
greatest
social
things
media.
in life are our pets. But I think part of that, right, the idea of depth, right? Like you might see some, again, it's how people post, but you might see like the achievement or the big thing, and then you see the top of the iceberg, but in the water you don't see all the other parts that they needed to get there, or all the other things going on in their life. A friend of mine, I went to his wedding this past year, and it was wonderful and great, and but I know that the depth of it hit so much harder for me because, like, he told me when he was thinking of proposing, and had I just really had my connection with this friend been through social media only, gosh, that would the depth there would have, that just shows in my mind, it shows to me, tells me how much more depth there is to this friendship than if I was only still catching up with him every now and then on social media. So I think my answer to it is it can really be, I think it's, Kim put it really great. It's this idea of depth, right? Like friends from different seasons of your life, you can kind of check in on them and see what they're doing, and you can interact with that. But then the next step, it takes us to go a little further, right? You can like their post or see it and kind of affirm them in that way, but the depth level takes something more. It takes us, taking it out of that, further from that post.
And I think as we age, that changes like drastically, because kids on social media, which that again could be a whole nother thing, because
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
very like
Yeah.
anti my child being on social media.
I know.
But I think when you're younger, you guys probably don't remember MySpace.
I remember.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I never had one, but I know.
Okay, so
some of it.
MySpace made it
Yeah.
very like you had your top 8 friends, and if you got kicked off the top 8 friends, you were like, "What is going on?" But I was already old enough that didn't have that impact on me. No, my husband did find me. We had met, and 2 years had went by, and he looked me up on MySpace, and we are married now. So thank you, MySpace. But
Oh, yeah.
I think I was able.
So you met on an app?
I mean,
you
we
come back
did-
for the
we
apps
met-
conversation.
We met in person, and then he literally only had my first name to go off of, and like where I lived locally. We had like met through a mutual friend, and he said he searched like 30 pages to find me. Like, that's dedication. And I
Oh,
was
yeah.
like,
Aw,
yeah.
that's
So,
pretty sweet.
Paid
so I
off,
do have
yeah.
a soft spot for some of it, but now as a parent, I'm like, it's not real. Like, and I think I want my 11-year-old, and he's a boy, so it's a different vibe, but girls especially. I just read The Anxious Generation. I don't know if anyone.
Yeah.
I told my poor son, I was like, buddy, when this comes into the library, like, expect you never to use your phone again. No, but it was a lot about mental health and how the social media affects our kids. And he does have a YouTube channel, which is only through his VR. He's not allowed to share his face. He's not allowed to share. And he has like 40,000 views, which I was like, whoa. But they know no
Yeah.
real contact information. There's nothing. They don't even know his actual name. It's like a made up thing. And it's all through his game. But even that, I was like, that freaks me out a bit. Like, I thought it was just a cute little thing he started doing. And he was like, look, Mom. And I'm like, we need to talk. Like, how far is this going?
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, and I want him, and he's very like, he's a therapist kid, so he's very like aware of it's not real. But the minute that he's like, I'm not getting enough likes or I'm not getting enough views, we're gonna stop. You know what I mean? Because it's
Transactional piece of it,
yes,
connecting it to his.
yes, like it's fun and it's silly, and he edits his little videos, and it's really
Yeah.
impressive. But at the point where he's like, I only got 500 views on this, and he's sad about that, that's we're done.
I'm also learning to, like, the internet's not your place to, like, air your grievances. Like, you need to have that, like, you need to have a conversation there.
And that's that depth, that real connection of this is not where we put those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. As you're talking, I have another question that I want to draw our attention to, but I think we're in I think MySpace and then into Facebook and then all of the social media, that was like one revolution. I think we're now in the AI revolution where we're going to see a bunch of new technology emerge. And I was just, I watched a lecture from Martin Seligman from UPenn. I don't know if he's the founder of positive psychology is his big claim to fame. And, but he's been messing around with the AI stuff quite a bit. And so what he did was he uploaded every single one of his books, every single one of his research papers, and then showed you in real time this interaction with this AI bot that he had created that was him based on uploading all this information to it. And then these people had this conversation with it, and there was these responses and all these different things. So that got me thinking. And so I started doing some research on AI friendships and relationships. And there's a subsection of the population. Like, I know they've made movies about it, and like Joaquin Phoenix had that one, Her, and there was another one, Ex Machina, which is a little bit different, but still. Megan, the AI friend that will kill people who are mean to you. But who doesn't want one of those, right? I'd probably have a Megan if I could. But no, that now folks are using this artificial as almost a supplement to real friendships and real relationships. And I saw somebody, and I wish I could cite them appropriately. I wasn't planning on talking about this here today. But basically, some talking head made the point that more and more these are going to fulfill our social relationships. And there's actually a subsection of individuals who are uploading like letters from loved ones and all this information from loved ones who have passed, and then have these conversations with the AI, and that like a percentage of them even turn sexual because they develop these romantic feelings towards this AI. And so while I think that our social media has changed relationships in certain ways, I'm really curious what AI is going to do, because I think we're going to see another evolution in our relationships and our social experiences with some of these different pieces.
It's terrifying, though.
Isn't it kind of scary?
And I don't know, like, I immediately go to like Skynet, like Terminator. I'm like, listen, it didn't end well, guys. Like, we shouldn't do this. But I don't know, that's terrifying. And I think we're going to miss all those connections. And like, it's almost very sad that they're connecting to these loved ones that have passed away. And I'm thinking that's a relatively unhealthy way to grieve. Like maybe in the short term, but wow.
In the long term? No, and my husband's like obsessed with AI because he programs our EMR systems, and he sees a lot of utility there.
And there's uses.
There's a lot of great use. There's a lot of great use, but then he's like, I just read this article that like 20% of people end up having like cyber sex with their AI bots. And I'm like, well,
that's disturbing. I mean,
that's a really high number. Like, where'd you get that data? Yes, I thought the data would be different.
Right.
So
Sure, yeah.
I don't know if you just start to think about how these and he's messed with it, like pretending it's a therapist to like play around with it. And he also struggles with introversion, and doesn't struggle with introvert, but he is introverted and has some social anxiety. And he said, I could see where somebody who deeply struggles with introversion or social anxiety could get the therapeutic benefits out of an AI bot for a minute, because they don't worry about what it's thinking about them, or like some of those pieces gets quieted in that space. And I said, I always have to ask permission. I said, can I take off my wife hat and put on my therapist hat for a minute, though, and point out the problem that I see with that, which is that the problem isn't the advice you get from the bot. The problem is that you struggle to feel authentic in your relationships in the first place. And so having a therapeutic relationship in which you are authentic and they like see the value in you and are affirming of you anyway, that's the secret sauce of therapy, not the
aspect.
not of the, have you tried, upping your water intake and exercising more. Great advice, but not necessarily big picture.
Because will a bot see things that in yourself that you don't see, like in a in-person therapy, if you will, remote therapy, either way? Will the bots AI have the capabilities of seeing those strengths that you don't self-identify? Maybe not.
Well, Well,
Yeah.
there's something to be said about lived experience. Like your bot is only as intelligent or smart as what you've uploaded to it. But when
Sure,
you
yeah.
look at this room, like we have all of these different life experiences that would make therapy with any one of us a completely different experience. Like even if we all had Kim's PhD here and we had been doing this for a long time and on paper everything looked the same, it's our other lived experiences that
be
make
different.
the relationship so different. And you can't get that from a bot.
No, it scares me. I mean, and I think social media in general has scared me some when it comes to relationships and friendships and depth of relationships. But then I started watching this AI stuff, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that's
Well, I saw the AI and I was like, did nobody watch Smart House? Like when it came
like all of them. Like that's what I'm saying.
Ron's gone wrong. I mean, come on. There's a lot of instances
through this.
where
They've been
this
trying to
does not
warn
work
us.
out. A lot of instances where this does not work out. The last question that was submitted here today that I want to spend a little bit of time on, and then we'll go ahead and wind down, is how do people, or what advice would you all have as a mental health provider on how individuals can rebuild their social circle after a significant life change? Whether it be a move, retirement, a divorce, finding their recovery, setting a significant boundary with other relationships. How can individuals in adulthood rebuild some of those social circles in a way that is congruent for them?
I love offering to get a meal with someone. Even just sharing food with someone. There's this shared space in that. Just going to catch up, because there's effort in that, right? You're taking time out of your day, not doing something else to go and put that effort in, spend that time with that person. I think something like that can be wonderful, to catch up with someone you haven't seen in a while, to just ask them questions. How are you? What's life look like for you? And see where that takes things. What I would say is think of the one person who you're not sure how they may respond or what would happen, and to challenge yourself to give it a shot. To not wait, as we said earlier, to quote Mel Robbins, some of the most, well, I know this would be returning to someone you've maybe had a former connection with and have fallen out of, or you're trying to rebuild. But the whole idea of don't wait. There's important people out there who you haven't met with, or you haven't met with in a while. So to just encourage, to challenge yourself to take that leap, to ask them to get a meal, to meet up with them. That can be the start. It sounds simple, and maybe it's not the most profound thing, but I just feel like some shared space, shared time. We may have this notion in our head, or these worries of, oh, will this person want to hear from me? Will they still like me? Will they be open to this? And we just don't know if we don't ask, right? Only something can really be gained there. So that's what comes to me.
No, I like that. I think what I've run into in developing friendships is a fear of taking the risk. Taking the risk, putting yourself out there. I was recently invited to a group chat of a bunch of women that have been friends for a while. It's through my Easter egg hunt friend, and she's like, oh, well, you need to join this friend group and so we're all planning, it was a lot of fun, but we planned a Temu prom where everyone bought the most ridiculous dress they could find for under $20.
Great.
Mine had feathers and sequins. I was delighted. But we did Temu prom, and but we were saying, oh, we should have some games. Well, do we want to have trivia? Do we want to have that? No, my husband and I are like big, nerdy, like game people, right? And so some of the titles, while, like Settlers of Catan or Carcassonne or Secret Hitler. And I had to like side text my friend, and I was like, can
Is it appropriate for this?
can we play Secret Hitler with this group or not? And really, it's not pro Hitler. We should be very clear.
We're gonna have that.
It's very anti-fascism, but is a fun game of like deception, and it's like what's the one where you put your head down, your thumb up,
Oh,
and
heads up, 7 up.
Heads up, 7.
yes, like it's like you
Classic.
lie and play and shoot each other. It's fun. Anyway, but I had to like then, and she's like, "Oh yeah, they're good." And then I in the group chat said, like, "Hey, I can bring Secret Hitler." Crickets. No one answered me, and I was like, "Oh shit, I did the thing. I said the thing. Now they think I'm a Hitler person." No. And obviously then they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. You know, my kid was puking or this was," and like, but just all of those things that rush in. And I think I'm a fairly
we wonder.
well-adjusted, confident adult. And meanwhile, I'm like up half the night obsessing because I was like, my new friends think I like Hitler. I don't know. So all of that to say, I think it like putting yourself out there, taking the risk. And it's scary, even as an adult. There's still that part of me that still feels like that 13-year-old girl that got rejected time and time again in junior and senior high. And it's like, is it going to happen here?
Right.
And it's not, because like most of us are grown now, but you still have that anxiety.
And I think that we had touched on like that courage and that bravery just to, and I just tend to be more of like, I will sit down and start a conversation. My husband's like, do you know that person? My son is the worst. He's like, did you know that person in line at the grocery store? And I'm like, no. And he's like, why were you talking to them? And I'm like, we just started a conversation. Now we're not exchanging numbers. But I think to answer the question though, it very much depends on a lot of things. Like, where are you in your walk of life? Like, you and I both have children. You guys do not. So I find a lot of my friends that way. And I think you guys probably find them in different ways. Like, there's all different ways. So I think it depends on where you are in life and how you can, you know, if I think, oh my gosh, if I moved somewhere completely new and I didn't know anyone, I would be like, hey, to my kid, like, let's go to like Get Air. Let's go somewhere that there is social people. We have the shared interest of, we most likely have children, unless you're a creeper and you're there for whatever reason. But like, we can find something that we can connect on and have that shared interest, like whatever it may be.
And that was going to be the point I brought up, but separate from kids. So a lot of my clients have really been struggling with either early recovery, you know, how do I make friends from scratch, or like a recent loss or a betrayal or moving. And it's like, how do we start from scratch? And I think it's about finding communities and opportunities that you can like just start going there and allow some of these friendships to interact.
The library or something.
Okay.
That's a big one.
So the Fleetwood Library has like this like crochet
Yes, all the
circle.
groups,
And
yeah.
when I tell you that towards the end of my medical leave, I was ready to learn how to crochet so I could go meet some old ladies at the library, because I was feeling so like lonely. And yeah, I had my two girls, but they like, I needed somebody close. I wanted some sort of close connection. I wanted to be able to have a meal with somebody. So it's like, go to the library, volunteer. You know, when you are doing volunteer work, the other people who are volunteering with you are likely to share some core values there that you can relate on. Your church, or it can be, you know, if you at work, you know, just hanging out in a different or coming in on a different shift. But there are like smaller communities that you can check out, and they just opened a cat cafe.
I just opened a book cafe.
I'm so ready to
We're
go
gonna
meet
check
some
that one.
cat
It's at
ladies.
the top of my list.
Like,
Oh my
there's a
gosh.
whole sub community of people
Yeah.
who are into like romantasy novels. It's like, go join this book club where you're all reading, you know, ACOTAR, and you don't want to tell each other.
My flippin' book club finally is reading. This is a total aside. I never go. I always read. I never go because I'm an introvert.
Is it the Hershey one?
Yes.
I've been invited so many
It's
times.
and I read along with them.
I do
I
sometimes
read the
too.
book
I'm like,
almost always. I read the
Yeah,
book,
yeah.
but I never go. This year or this month, it's When Women Were Dragons, which is like my favorite book of last year, and of course I can't go to the. I know.
Do you know the one in? You're talking about the one, not that, but the book cafe that opened in Palmyra.
Yes,
They also do a book club.
that's. I think,
I'm gonna shoot for
yeah.
that one. We missed the last one, but my best friend and I, we also share a very big love of reading and things, and we've like made it a point that we're gonna try to do monthly like girl dates, because it's so hard to connect. We text all the time. We do all the things.
If you're not
do we see
intentional,
each
though.
other in person? And like, she's a therapist, but she's school based. We see each other at treatment team.
Yeah.
That's it. So we're going to be intentional, and that's going to be one of we're going to go to this book club, and we're going to drink the coffee and talk about the book. I'm super excited.
Yeah.
Like yoga studios or your gym, right? Some of these gyms, like not every gym is a Planet Fitness where everybody goes and does their own thing. I think Anytime Fitness, it's a more of like a smaller community. Like Orange Theory is more like competing
My
with.
yoga studio, like they hug you when you walk in. I mean, there is such a level
great.
of connection and community there. Um, so I think, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember having a client once upon a time who was extremely isolated, and she found an ethnic food meetup group.
Wonderful.
Where
Wow. That's
once a
wonderful.
month they would. Now this was when I lived in Dallas, so Dallas
Yeah.
Fort Worth. There's a
Yeah.
lot more options there, but I would say even in rural Pennsylvania, if you were really intentional about it and that was an interest, you could figure it out. And she made so many friends through that environment. And she was nervous about going, and we like helped her. I know when I was early postpartum, I joined Hike It Baby,
Yeah, that one.
where I would go out and go hiking with my baby with other early new moms. And that was another great way. So I think if you have an interest, there's a group for it. It's just about kind of finding it and getting connected
And that's
to
where
it.
that social media comes in.
And that's where social media
Yes.
helps
And that's
friendships.
that's a positive thing. So you
Yeah.
can look up, I'm really interested in da 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 whatever, and you can find something locally.
I made a friend at a bonsai tree class the other week. My tree died, but
Sorry.
we now are threatening to get coffee with one another. So
There
we'll
you go.
see. We'll
It
see what
might
happens.
develop.
Well, thank you all. Thank you for coming and sharing your wisdom, your experience, and strength with us all here today. In terms of the How to Be Happy Hour, we are going to be very intentional about looking at all different types of relationships. So friendships, dating relationships, parenting relationships. We're sort of planned out for the first half of the year. When it comes to the second half of the year, I do have a couple more topics percolating. So grandparent relationships, I think, will be added to that list. I also want to talk about cousins, because I think cousins are such a unique but important part of our social community. So anyway, thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, comments, or hot topics, please reach out to me at kim@howtobehappyhour.com. And otherwise, have a great rest of your week. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.